and make sure it's in frame. Good. Okay. Does anyone have challenges closing? Annie?
Me? Yeah. But
Why?
I can't tell you like why. It just doesn't like happen.
Damn. This thing is just so hard to get to focus sometimes. Because I want him to be able to read when I'm writing. Okay. So, you don't know why it's hard for you to close.
I mean, it used to be because like when I would ask for appointments, it's because I didn't see the value in the appointment, but now I do. So
Okay.
I'm closing more.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that's a good point. Let's just say not confident in value. I would say reasons people don't close, right? They're not confident in the value of themselves and whatever they're setting the appointment for. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay? Another reason I see people like having trouble or difficulty or not wanting to close is they have fear of rejection. Right? You're fearful that they'll say no, right? And you don't want to have that conversation after they say no, right? Another one is assuming, this is probably the worst, assuming they like me. Yay. Smiling face.
Assuming they only like me.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about other realtors too.
Assuming that either you're talking to them and or you meet with them, mm-hmm. You're assuming that just because that, or you give them your business card and you had a good conversation, that means they're your customer, mm-hmm. Right? Kind of like, I think I texted you. Didn't I text you? You said something about, you were asking a question, you said, for my buyer. Yeah. And I said,
they're not
for your buyer, do you have a signed agreement yet? And you said no. And I said, they're not your buyer, right? Yeah. Like, that's not your buyer. You know, that's everyone's buyer until, or it's a buyer in the marketplace until we have a solidified relationship and they come to you when it's time to have a question or see a property. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. So assuming that they like you is a big mistake, okay? If they like you, then you solidify that with closing for the business. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Asking for the business. So you're not confident in value. You have fear of rejection. You're assuming that they like you. That's probably where most people land. Between this and fear of rejection are the two things that I think most people have problems with in terms of closing. And then I would say they just forget. Period. You're in an appointment or a meeting and you just don't close. Like you just forget. It's a good meeting. The buyer's like, yes, I'm excited. And you say, great, well, I'll send you a list of properties, and boom, boom, it's over and done. Yeah. However, you forgot to set the expectations of like, okay, well, now that we're all excited, here's what happens next. Does that make sense? Like, they have to know, like, what happens in the professional relationship now that we've created this relationship, right? Mm-hmm. You have to set a standard of, here's what I expect from you, here's what you expect from me. Like an attorney. Attorneys don't have a great intro call with you and then say, great, we'll like kind of just willy-nilly kind of work into this case. It's like, okay, well, sign my $1,000 per hour contract and here's my plan of execution. Here's what I need from you, right? All those things. They forget. Any other reasons you feel like if a customer, like you have a great phone call and or a great meeting where you don't close, what's driving that decision?
Taking their word for it. Like sometimes people are like, I'm not ready yet, and you're just like, okay.
Okay.
Even after you have all the great conversation, you have offered all the value and they're really, like they have bought in, but they're like, I'm not ready yet. And you're like, okay, I'll check in with you next month, like whatever their reasoning was. and then 3 days later they are ready, but you're not calling for 27 more days.
Yeah.
Now you have missed opportunity.
Got it. Okay, I think that encompasses pretty much all situations, right? The two you have to watch out for is assuming that they like you and not being fearful of rejection, right? Assuming that they like you is the worst.
It is.
It's the worst. I'll just tell you, I've interviewed hundreds of real estate agents, guys, hundreds of them, and met lots and worked with lots, and they all say the same thing when they got into the business, right? Like, it's all pretty much the same. It's like, well, people always said that I would be great at real estate because I'm personable, and everyone likes me. I like making friends. I like meeting new people. Well, most of the people you're going to meet and talk to are going to like you, right? Because you're engaging, and that's what kind of attracted you into the business, right? You're good at kind of like a chameleon getting into rapport with people, or you're learning how to do that, and you're getting better at it. So they're going to like you in a conversation, right? That's like the human thing to do. If you're talking, you get along and you're liking each other, right? So you fall into this trap, like, oh, that was a great conversation. They like me. We're going to work together. And then they don't answer the phone for 3 months, right? And then you find out that they bought or sold with someone else, right? And it's as simple as asking for the business most of the time, right? So I'll tell you like a quick story. Like my mentor, like who I got to learn real estate with, Tom, he, his sales skills were mediocre at best, right? Like a robot. Like, hey Joe, how's it going? My name's Tom. Great, nice to meet you. Like, this is role play. Hey Joe, my name's Tom Daves. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Great, good. Okay, can you take me through the house?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a beautiful home. Great. Can we sit at the table?
Yeah.
So tell me why you'd like to move.
Just want to move to a new area.
Oh, okay, great. Well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And he would just boom, 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 ask a question with no interest of, like, he's not listening, right?
Yeah.
Never would listen, never would take notes, never would, like, respond with what the customer responded with, mirror match, none of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was all about working through the packet in exact, right? Meaning, like how I've taught you all to present the listing packet or the buyer packet, he would do that. He would do it exact, right? Every time. And he would ask like 5 questions, same people every time. At the end of the meeting, he would play one of his radio ads and say, what do you think about that? And it's like so embarrassing. But this is my big aha. But when it came down to, it would be at the time when the packet's done, great, we talked about the price, we talked about fees. He would say, are you ready to get the paperwork started? And he'd roll right into, great, are you ready to get the paperwork started? And the listing presentation was probably 36 minutes. Boom, 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 boom. And I was always blown away at, like, he would, we worry so much if they like us or if a rapport, and he would blow right past anybody, right? Like, he would pretend to care, but you could tell, like, his legs shaking, he's trying to get out of there, right? And if they would say no, he would start to address objections, but come back and just cutthroat. Great, well, that's a reason why we should get the paperwork started, right? Or let's sign now, and if you change your mind tomorrow, you can cancel, or sign now, even though your spouse is not here, right? Talk to them tonight. I could even come back, tomorrow or the next day, but let's sign now, right? I mean, all 6, 7 times, right? Cutthroat. But 8 times out of 10, he'd walk out with a signature, right? And no rapport, doesn't give a shit about their concerns, right? You could tell he wasn't listening, but he would get the listing, right? And so the difference there is not about his skills. It's not about, he had a track record, so, he does have that advantage where he's been in the business a long time. People just know that he is experienced, right? But people do business with people they like, right? And that's like your assumption. However, half the battle is just getting the appointment. The other half of the battle is just getting yourself to ask for the business when you're at the appointment, right? Most people don't get the business because they're not asking. It's not about the person liking you or your value not being high enough. It's just simply you did not close and ask and say, hey, we'd love to work with you. what are your objections here, right? If you're not willing to sign the agreement, let me ask you, what that I've gone over today causes you concern not to feel like we're the best fit for you? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is a good close for a buyer, after you've presented the buyer agreement?
I always go through the agreement, the buyer agreement, and I just let them know, go through the Mike, whatever his last name is, promise script. I'm like, hey, essentially what these bullet points are saying is that I'm going to provide such a high quality service that you guys can imagine this process being any different. And then all I ask out of you is that, for anybody write me a review. Are you guys okay with that today?
And they very rarely ever say no, right? And then the other step after that is where most people they hesitate, right? Because when you ask that question, does that all sound good, or is there anything in there that doesn't sound good? And they're like, no way, that sounds great. Well then, great, let's sign the agreement now, and then we can start the process. It's that one sentence that keeps people from they're just hesitant to say, well, they don't want to ask them to sign something, right? And it's this limiting belief that we have in our own head. But the aha is if you start doing that every time, like Tom, where it's just it's automatic, it's robotic. It's after I say this, I say that, right? If you do that more often than not, you're gonna get them to sign agreements with you by default. You're just asking for it. They like you. It was a good meeting. You presented the value. It's the next step, next logical step, right? So just rolling right into so you go over the buyer agreement before you ask them to close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you present buyer agreement. Okay. I would call that passive closing. You're kind of leading them into just, hey, these are all the things we do for you, and in return, you're agreeing to do these. Let's both sign this to agree to it, right? It's a passive close, and most of the time that works really good, right? But then if they say no, and you have to start working through objections, now you're moving into more of a let's call it an aggressive close, where you're actually trying to present, you're trying to correct an objection, right? Or at least explain the value, and then close again. Let's get the paperwork started, right? Yeah. What is another close you can use when you're with a buyer and you're trying to get them to sign the agreement?
Wait, there's passive close and active close. What would be the other close?
Well, the difference with a passive closing is just you're leading them into signing an agreement, meaning what's the best way to explain this? Rather than you say, you get done with your buyer presentation, you don't even present them the buyer agreement, right? Maybe you do in a format and say, hey, now that we've gone over the process, now that we've gone over our programs, there's for our customers, for us to engage with you and to work with you, we ask all of our customers to make an agreement with us, right? That agreement can be canceled at any time. It's not legal. It's just an agreement between me and you saying, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. You're going to do X, Y, Z. So let's get that started now and sign the agreement. Versus a much more passive way to do it, which is here's the 10 things, going into the promise and reading off the 10 things that we provide the customer. Does that make sense?
So the way I present it is that it's for me to work with you, to invest anything in you, this is what I need to get started. So it's a non-negotiable.
Yeah. So that would be a much more aggressive closing. So some people, neither way is wrong. Great salespeople know who needs what close. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, you kind of read the
what
room.
situation warrants certain types of closings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when they're saying that they have worked with another agent, but they just want to go see a home, go through the whole presentation, and then it's a very active close. No, if we work together, you're agreeing to work with me going forward and only me.
Right. Right.
Until you rip up the agreement.
For sure.
Then, if I haven't earned the business, of course, right? If I'm not providing the service that I'm promising, of course, then I'm not going to expect you to work with me. But if I'm doing all of these things, what would cause you to not want to work with me?
Yeah. Another thing that I would call is like an assumptive close. And we can do this. This is really good to do in the middle of presentations.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically leading them up to when you're actually going to close, right? So like, let's say we're in the middle of explaining like the buyer process, let's call it, right? Let's say you've gone over like some of the programs, getting qualified and all of that. You can ask them questions around qualifications. So you've been pre-approved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing is with like working through a presentation, we're kind of getting to all of the objections a buyer would have. So if they're not pre-approved, that's already an objection, right? Like, oh, I don't want to get pre-approved yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're addressing you would ask, are they pre-approved or not? You should know that before the meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to ask it again in the presentation to find out why, what's holding them back from getting pre-approved right now, right? And you could even use in that conversation, let's say, they say, oh, we're going to get pre-approved, we're just waiting on X, Y, Z. And that's when you can say, great, well, if you're working with me, we can work with Movement Mortgage, who can help you close within 17 to 21 days. Can I get that set up for you after this meeting?
Mm-hmm.
That would be an assumptive close, meaning like you're already assuming that they're working for you. And if they were to reply yes, yeah, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that, right? I would just like skip to, if you're giving like, let's say assumptive closes where you're kind of asking them without closing hard on them, meaning like, do you want to work with me type questions, and they're already showing that they're agreeable to that, I would just skip to the 10 things we're going to do for them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, don't skip any setting expectations of the process and how it works. However, you don't really need to go much further than that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, an assumptive close is just you're making statements to fish out if they're already agreeable to work with you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're trying to, let's just say, to fish out if they will work with you. So, for example, a seller, right? In a listing appointment, I could say something like, would you be opposed if I put a sign in the ground? Simple question like that. Like, no, that's not a big deal at all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Let's go ahead and get the paperwork started so
Mm-hmm.
I can get that on order and get it delivered in the next week or two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you can say things like, in my marketing plan, we want to meet with the stager way in advance to make sure that you guys are decluttering properly.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be opposed to that? And if they say no, well then great, we're going to skip to, and if I've already gone over all the things I really need to go over, we're going to skip right to, great, let's get the paperwork started
Mm-hmm.
and get the ball rolling on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You should be making some assumptive closes in your presentation because you're already kind of training them that you're going to ask them for the business. Does that make sense? Because if you wait all the way until the end, then you have that risk of that awkward moment, right? Where you're not sure if they want to work with you and you're closing on them and they're objecting. And then usually most people, when someone objects, they're not going to push through it,
Mm-hmm.
right? They are not going to close 2, 3, 4, 5 times because that one objection goes back to that fear of rejection. And they say, well, great, we can always follow up with you in the future. I don't want to pressure you and do anything, right? So, give yourself the best chance and start asking like assumptive questions
Mm-hmm.
in that meeting to make sure that when you are at the end of the presentation, you have a good gauge of, are you in a rapport or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what would another good question for a buyer be? Hey, like, would you like to be eligible for our off-market opportunities or cash offer program?
Definitely.
Okay.
Or like, hey, if I had a property off market that fit all this criteria we just talked about, would you buy it, right? And if they say yes, like you already know, motivated, interested, right?
Yeah.
And if they say yes, then I would say, great, let me tell you about the 10, our promise to you, right? Work through the 10 things, give them their 3 things, and boom, sign the agreement, right? You can also start planting seeds like, during your meeting, talking about off markets or whatever. You can start planting seeds. Like that's why we make agreements with our customers, right? That's why we fully commit to our customers and we ask them to fully commit to us because we offer these things that are unique compared to everyone else, right? It's kind of like dating. Like we want an exclusive relationship, so we're 100% committed to that person, right? So if you're starting to like plant seeds that's the way we work, that's the way we operate, by the time you get to the end of the meeting, it's kind of like a natural evolution right into the question of, will you work with me, right? Annie, do you think that at the end of a presentation, you could say, will you work with me?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
You feel confident in that?
I think I close better in meetings than I do for the appointment.
On the phone?
Yeah. Now, if it's a Zoom meeting, no, because I have to send it through DocuSign. I can't like push them to sign it because we're not in person.
Yeah.
But like when I've had in-person meetings, I think I've gotten like almost all of them to sign. Zoom is harder, but yeah, I mean, I don't say will you work with me, but I can.
Yeah. I feel like, and that's not just to single you out, a lot of people are worried to ask someone, like, great, that's why we should work together, right? Will you work with me? We have to treat it like, especially for buyers, it's, because it's no different than sellers, but it's perceived different. You sign a listing agreement, and now you're working for a seller. On the buyer side, it's like we look at properties, and then once we make a contract on a home, now we're working for the buyer, right? And that's kind of how the public perceives it, right? But our model is we flip that around, and it should be like that. The buyers should have a consultation. They should know exactly what to expect, right? They should not get so deep into like the marketplace and find a home they love and start figuring out how it all works, right? The success rate is very low for customers if they do that on their own,
Yeah.
right? So, using that to our advantage and saying, hey, I've helped buyers of all kinds. The ones who don't meet, who don't plan, who don't organize ahead of time, always take 5 times as long with more frustration and headache, right? Because they're trying to figure it out as they go. They're practicing in real life, right? When in reality, we should be practicing right here at the table before you go on this journey, right? Make sense? Yeah. So, what is a good question you can ask if you're asking someone to work with you? Like closing wise. Like, will you work with me is one.
I always ask what are some of the important qualities in the realtor for you to work with them?
Okay. I mean, I'm talking about getting to the closing portion. Like when you're asking them to sign an agreement, that's like a question to probe out what they're looking for in an agent, right? I'm asking, like, when you're ready to pop the question, let's say, what question are you asking to get them to sign the agreement? Like, will you sign the agreement? Is that what you're saying? Or what's a good way to ask that question?
To get to go to the next step, here is the agreement that you need to sign to work with me.
Here is the agreement. Okay. I just want everyone to hear this. To get to the next step. Next step. Okay, anyone else? Something different?
One I said yesterday that worked well, and they didn't object at all. I just asked them, I was like, hey, I think we're a great fit. Do you guys think we're a great fit? And they're like, yeah. And then I was like, okay. And then I just rolled right into the agreement.
Yeah. Then great. Let's get the let's get the agreement signed. Okay.
Yeah, like
Do you think we are a great fit? Let's get started. Okay. The one that has always worked well for me and is just super easy is, great, let's get the paperwork started so we can get the ball rolling on our next steps. Just let's get the paperwork started and get it out of the way and roll to our next steps. And when a buyer objects to that, right, that's when we can start throwing in, well, do you think it's a great, like, I feel like we're a great fit. Our meeting's been great. What about you? And they say, yeah, no, it's great. Well, then great. Why would we not get the paperwork started so we can get rolling, right? And you're uncovering the questions that they have, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
There's a saying, it's objections, and I'm probably going to butcher it because I never remember sayings, are questions from the customer where there is not clarity. Got it?
Yes.
So if they object, like, no, I'm not signing that agreement, right? There's questions that they have that are still left unanswered, right? And so let's talk about that for a minute, right? What are some of the reasons someone says no when you ask them to sign the agreement?
One I've heard is just I don't want to sign anything.
Okay, don't want to sign. All right.
Yeah. They want to interview other agents.
Okay, yep, they want to interview.
They think that there is monetary penalty for signing.
Okay, even though we explained that,
Yeah,
money, cost.
like there's something hidden.
Okay, all right. That's a question for sure. What else?
They're limiting themselves.
What do you mean?
They're just agreeing to work with one agent, and they think that might limit them from opportunity that working with multiple agents might
Working
provide.
with more agents.
Mhm.
Okay. That's probably the most common.
Yeah,
Equals more.
opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Any others that you've heard? No. Okay. I would say another one would be they want money. Whether that's commission reduction, credit, something. They want something from you to get that, right? Got it. So let's just talk about these. Want to interview. We'll roll right into objections because this is all in regards to closing. I want to speak with more agents. Okay. I want to speak with more agents before I sign that document, right? What would you say to that? So we've worked through our packet, we've worked through all of the, what happens next and all that stuff. We've asked them to sign the agreement. Now, I want to talk to more agents first. What's your response?
What other information are you looking for?
Okay. Let me give you a suggestion there.
Mhm.
Yeah, to help, because that's kind of open-ended.
Mhm.
What other information are you looking for?
Mhm.
I would say I would be more direct. What have I gone over today that causes you to have concerns and want to look for alternatives? Something like that, right?
Okay.
Instead of like, what are you looking for? I would say, what have I gone over today that causes you concern or has you exploring alternatives?
Mhm.
Because we kind of hit all of the bases. And I would even add in, like, if you interview 5 agents, none of them are going to be able to offer you these things that we're offering, right? These are unique. So what have I gone over today that would cause you concern?
Mhm.
Want to know what the response is most of the time? Huh?
Is it commission?
No,
No?
nothing. Honestly, nothing.
Yeah.
That's when you say, great. Well, then what do you have to go meet more people for?
Yeah.
Right? So there's nothing I've gone over today that causes you concern. but yet you just told me you want to interview agents. What's driving that? Just because you hear you should, right? I mean, you're talking to the number one team in the marketplace. It's like going to Rolls Royce, right?
Yeah.
Like you have $1 million to buy a car, you go to the best car place, right? You found it, right? So what do you need to go talk to more people for? Okay?
I want that recorded so I can just play it at appointment.
That's where you go first.
Like,
Is like, well, why? I mean, no, there's no issue. So, why do you want to waste that time, right? And if they say, well, I still want to interview, you say, great, okay, that, I actually want you to go interview so you can come back to me and know just how good we are and what we offer, right? So you have something to compare us to, right? I promise you'll come back with a very confident feeling that you're in the best hands with us and what we can do for you. So that's why we should get the paperwork started now, and then you should go interview those agents this week, and then you can call me after you're done, and we'll rip up the contract in the event you find there's someone offering something better than us to help you achieve your goal, right? Get the contract signed, and then they can go meet those people, right? That's how you close multiple times, right? It's not like, well, you just keep hitting them over and over again. Well, no, let's get the paperwork. Can you please sign the paper? It's not like you're begging them, right? You're working through, they have an objection. You ask a question to uncover the objection. Because in reality, like this situation, like Nikki and I just talked about, there really is no objection, right? I asked her, what concerns do you have over what we went over today? Is there something lacking or missing? She says no. So there is no objection. It's just this, they assume that they're supposed to go talk to multiple people. Does that make sense? And so at first you want to try to like squash it and say, well, if there's no objections, why waste your time? Like you're talking to the best of the best. Let's just get the paperwork started. That week you would have spent, we might be able to find a home and have you in escrow in that same week, right? Rather than waste time talking to agents, right? If that doesn't work, you roll back into signing the agreement and allowing them and actually like proactively recommending them to go interview agents so that they can see just how different and unique we are. Because I promise they're not going to like sit down and talk to someone and do a consultation. Like people say they do consultations, but they don't, right? Most people do not do consultations, even if they say they do. Even if they know it's the right way to do it, they're not. They're chasing, they're jumping and running. Most agents are going to jump and run, or they're going to meet them at an open house and just transition into showing property, right? And then just kind of follow along, right? Well, that way is not scalable, and you can't, that's why most agents are stuck between, 5 closings and 15 closings, because they're wasting a lot of time on people who wind up buying with someone else and or changing their mind rather than working with really qualified buyers and working them through a process. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to speak with more agents. 2 ways to go about that. One is ask a question of what concerns they have. And when they respond, well, I don't really have any concerns, you just close again, right? And say, great, well, that kind of sounds a little silly, right? Like you want to go interview other agents, but you're saying that we're plenty experienced enough, right? And you feel good about it, so why waste the time, right? It's not like getting bids from contractors and the cost is going to change substantially, right? Does that make sense? Like the current setup, the seller's paying the agent, right? They're not paying the money. That's probably going to change soon, right? But right now, they're not. So you could even say it's like not stacking up bids. It's not like one's at 15, one's at 10, and then one's at 6, right? It's truly about like the experience level, the programs we provide, and how on top of an experience we are in getting buyers in a contract in this super aggressive market, right? They want money, commission reduction, right? What's a good response to that?
How will it benefit you? Sounds very dry, but I always just say that.
How will the
reduction
money
in my commission benefit you? And
benefit you?
and they always say that it'll save them money.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I
they
mean,
just
that's what
kind of
I
laugh about it.
think. Yeah.
Like it'll save money.
Okay. Well,
And
that will, if you laugh about it and
not me, they laugh about it.
oh.
I don't laugh at it.
So what's the response to that after they say,
What if I could show you a way? No, I have 2-3 different responses for that, and I just kind of gauge it which one is going to work. One is if I am the kind of agent who's willing to reach in my pocket to give you money, do you think I am able to prevent you from losing money in negotiations? If I can't even negotiate my own money, can I protect your money?
Yeah.
And then the second is, what if I could show you a way that without having to, take any from my part of the commission, I can save you money in negotiations, in the contract, find you the best deal, work hard because I know I'm earning that money.
Yeah.
Who would I be willing to work hard for? The person who's I'm cutting commission for, or the person I'm getting full commission for?
Yeah. All of those are, that's KW training through and through, right? Bold training. It's definitely, those are good objection handlers for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the, if I'm Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, how good do you think I am at negotiating if I'm reaching into my own pocket and coughing up money from the very get-go, right? So that is most definitely probably the most common objection handler to that. Although I personally feel like it's kind of outdated, right?
It is.
Meaning, because you can't be too aggressive. What they're really saying is what the buyer is really saying when they want a credit, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just wanting to win something, right? And so they're also assuming that there's companies out there that do this. There's a lot of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're also assuming that those companies are the same as you and they're all equal, right? So put yourself in the shoes of the prospective buyer/seller, right? They assume that everyone's equal, and so whoever gives me the best deal is who I'm going to go with, right? That's really what they're saying, because they're going to ask everyone for that thing, right? And so some good ways around that. That is a good question. How will that benefit you, right? I would ask them, sir, miss, the agent who's going to give you that credit, right, from the very beginning. I would challenge you to look at their sales. They must obviously need that money more than I do, right? And so this is not a market where you're trying to save like $6,000, right? Because that's about what you would get if I gave you a credit, like $5,000, $6,000, which is a lot of money in mine or your pocket. However, you're trying to win the deal, right? When there's 10 buyers for every home, I give you an advantage in this marketplace purely because of my experience and name, let alone our programs that you can't get anywhere else, right? But I'm unwilling to give you my money, but I am willing to let you work with me so that you have an advantage in this marketplace, right? And you can let them go and interview multiple people, but you need to let them know, because there is no negotiating in this market, right? So, I've always tried to approach it by they're perceiving a lack of value, right? And that's why they're asking for this. So I would lean on trying to reinforce the value proposition with them in a respectful, forceful way, meaning like, hey, I can appreciate you want to get the best deal possible. However, taking money from me is not the best deal for you because we won't work together if that happens, right? I give concessions all over the place, thousands of dollars a month. I'm kicking dollars here and there. However, I'm not going to give it up front because I usually kick dollars all over the place when we're in contract and I need to use that money to get deals done, right? So you can either get the credit now, $5,000-$6,000 from an agent. Why is my freaking phone is blowing up? You can either get the credit now and find an agent, start hunting around to get that 1% or whatever it is, right? And spend a couple weeks trying to get someone to give you the $5,000-$6,000. However, it will cost you in the long run because that agent, I promise you, is going to take 5 months to get you in contract have no leverage in the marketplace, and I would imagine it's going to cost you more money by the time you finally land in the house that you win, right? Because that $6,000 is not giving you any leverage in negotiating with the seller at all, right? Like, what are you going to make your offer $6,000 over asking, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? So we need to get into the head of the buyer or seller who asked for that, and it's not their fault. They're just perceiving everyone's the same, right? It's like they're looking at cars, like you're car shopping, you have the package you want, right? And they're all the same. Like, you know the interior you want, you know all the things that you want. So now you're going to all the car dealerships and comparing the same platform, the same model, the same everything, with similar miles and whatnot. And now you're looking for the best deal possible, right? However, we need to make sure that that customer knows that we're not the same, right? Agents are not created equal, and that's shown in the statistics, right? The median income of a real estate agent in California is $24,000, right? That means that the average agent in California sells 1.7 homes, right? Do you want to work with, for $6,000, someone who sells 1.7 homes per year, right? No, I mean, I'm sure he doesn't, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the objection handlers for I want a credit, like, do you want me to reach into my pocket and give it to you and I'll negotiate you the best deal? They work for sure if you don't know what to say. But I would always lean on.
This is more smooth. Though.
I would lean on reinforcing our value proposition again, right? And just saying, hey, I can appreciate you want to get the best deal possible, right? Fair enough. Would it be fair to say that if you want to save, $5-6 grand, would you give up taking 4 times as long to get into contract for the 4, 5, 6 grand? That's what I would ask. Like, if they say no, I say, great, that's why you should work with me. I'm not going to give you the credit, but I will get you into contract faster, right? And with interest rates going up the way they are, they're already up like 0.5% in the last year, or last 4 months, let's call it. It could be very costly if you don't get your house into contract extremely quickly, right? So that's a good one for I want money. I don't want to sign paperwork. That is pretty common, right? Especially for buyers. What's a question? Objection, like, how do you uncover what the objection is?
Signing the agreement to work with you, that paperwork?
The what?
What paperwork?
The agreement.
The agreement, right?
The agreement?
The agreement to agree to work with you, that paperwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want to sign any paperwork, right? I actually don't think that's the objection. I think the objection actually is...
that one, feel working with more agents.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the challenge there, yeah.
So you want to uncover, if they say, I'm not comfortable signing paperwork, you want to uncover what the real motivation is. Like, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
What makes you uncomfortable about signing a contract, right? Because, when we go to make an offer to the seller, you're not just texting them what you want to make the number, right? There's a contract that's in place, right? So don't you think it would be fair that, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, don't you think it would be fair that, like, you have a contract with me that states what I need to do for you, right? Wouldn't that make sense? Like, or how loyal is someone going to be if they know that you're seeing other people, right? If it's an open relationship, if you're seeing other people, I'm going to see lots of other people, right? Like, I'm going to focus on the people who actually want to see me back, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not going to bring you the best of the goods if you're out there, hustling and seeing other folks, right?
Yeah.
So I would always come back to, if they want to have this open relationship, right? Again, there's a lack of perception of value and a misunderstanding of why it's important, right? So you need to help them you need to clarify for them why. And a lot of that comes down to the presentation to begin with. If they still feel that way after the presentation, we haven't delivered it properly. Does that make sense? Like, they're still not seeing the value of what we offered at the end, if they're saying this at the very end, right? And so I'd go back to, some of the key points in the presentation. Well, do you think that if you're out there working with 7 agents, do you think that I would bring you an off-market deal or even attempt to go find off-market deals and invest the time if you're investing your time with anyone who brings you a deal or whatever the case may be? Like, you think I'm actually going to invest time in actively and proactively working for you if I know that you're not committed to us, right? Like, I don't have time for that right now. That's what I would lean on in this market. I was like, I got time for buyers like you right now, right? Like, we're proactively marketing, we're hammering the streets, we're literally looking at property the second it lists. I don't have time for you, and I'm betting any agent worth their salt won't have time for you either. They might pretend like they do, but again, we'll go back to the 5-month plan. This is a 5-month plan to get a house, not a 4-week plan to get a house. So, if you want the 4-week plan, come back and see me, right? But let me show you how we do that, right? I just went over all the things that we do to make sure you get a house in 4 weeks, right? But if I still can't convince you, have at it, right? I promise you will be back, right? So you have to give them a clarity on why it's important, right? And I always use time, because time is money, right? Time in this market is really valuable, and correlate it to interest rates, because as rates go up, it'll get more costly for them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, one more. More agents, more opportunity. That's probably the number one reason, would you say?
Yes.
What are some good ways to combat that?
If you don't have a signed agreement with an agent, that agent is not working for you. They're,
Focus. We'll call it focus.
yeah, they're not spending any time, energy, effort into prioritizing you over people that they have signed agreements with.
Yeah. I would be careful with saying signed agreements, because they're already afraid of them, right? That's why, and I'm not selecting that out. What I would say is, it's right, you're right? Like, that's what we want them to understand. But the agreement doesn't matter. It's like not worth the paper it's written on, right? The reason I'm asking you guys to follow this model of signing agreements is more of a qualifier for you to know who to focus on. Does that make sense? It's not for them, it's for you.
Yeah.
It is for them. I mean, they're much more likely to be a loyal client if they sign an agreement with you. It's like this perception, we now have a contract, a bond, right? Even though the bond itself is not worth the paper it's written on, right? But I know agents all over the country that they sign real buyer agreements, meaning, like, if that buyer buys someone else, like, they go after the buyer for the money, right? Or they actually write into the agreement that if the commission being offered is 2%, the buyer pays the difference, right? I mean, I know an agent in DC, like number one agent in DC, like they average a 3.25% commission on the buyer side because they charge the buyers if the commissions are low, right? And they just slip it into the contract and don't explain it very heavily, and they're making money like hand over fist off of this, right? But they're super duper aggressive with it, meaning like when we don't work with anyone unless we have a contract. And if you don't want to sign a contract, you don't get our value, right? And that's okay. We'll go on to the next. We have plenty of people that want to work with us. But that perception to the customer, the willing to walk away, is what will get you more contracts. Does that make sense? People they don't want someone with desperation.
They're like playing hard to get.
Yes. Not even hard to get. You are a pro. It's like an attorney that you walk into and say, like, hey, I have this case I want to fight, but I'm not willing to sign a contract. Like, whatever attorney can go win for me, that's the one I'll pay, right? Like,
no attorneys.
Yeah, you will never, ever, ever be able to. No one would work for that, right? Does that make sense? And in this market, you cannot afford to go work like that for buyers in this marketplace if you don't know for sure they're going into war with you, right? Because that's really what it is. Like, it's super competitive still, right? So I would hit on focus on the customer. These are some things you can tell a buyer so that they understand why it's important, right? I would call it leverage in the marketplace. Kind of like on that call, I don't know if you guys listened to it yet with Nick yesterday, right? Like,
Yes.
Like you need to help them understand our leverage in the marketplace. Like that guy called on Humbug. However, we have 2 other listings that we know coming in the neighborhood. He hit on cash offer program. The guy's like, wow, I kind of heard of that before, right? Like these are things that, it's kind of normal to us. However, outside of our team, that's not normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't get that. You cannot get it. It's impossible. They can't do it, right? So maybe re-hitting on those points again with the buyer if they're still objecting and they're still wanting to, see other people, right? You need to re-hit on the leverage that we provide them, and we only give that leverage to people who are committed to us, right? And I would always focus on speed to contract, meaning that takes 10 times as long, right? If you have no because this way you're not a customer, right? Like they need to know that. Like if you want to go about this with like 6 agents, you are not a customer of anyone, right? So I don't know what you can even ask them, like what business are you in, right? Because most people's jobs, they like work with customers, right? And I would say like if someone wasn't your customer, how much effort, time, and thought are you putting into that person? If they're not your customer, right? They're like everyone's potential customer, but not really a customer yet, right? That's like trying to get a contractor to do anything for you if you're not their customer. Like it's impossible, right? So you need to help them realize that and say you could possibly get homes that way, going to the listing agents, going open house to open house on your own. Kind of like the guy that talked to Nick on the phone, right? He's been looking for 6 months. He even answered his own question in the call. He's like, yeah, I can only do so much. So, helping them realize the speed at which, like, and good points around that are, tell me about your work schedule. Do you work 8 hours a day? Well, what are you doing between 9 and 5 to improve your situation for finding a home, right? Are you able to be 100% flexible? If a home pops up at 9 a.m., can you go get there at 12? Because sometimes that's what it needs, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So you want to like challenge them on that. Speed to get into contracts is important. Relationships in marketplace. For example, the guy the guy on Humbug that wrote the first offer, it came in at $980. We had 2 more offers come in. They increased their offer. They knew that it was going to go higher. They proactively increased their offer, but they were still $10K short of the highest offer, right? But I knew the guy, and I've done several transactions with him before, right? And I presented the offers to the seller. I didn't tell him who the buyer was, and I also didn't tell him who the agent was. I just told him the winning offer is $1,035,000, no contingencies. You should take the offer. He said, whatever you think, great. But I didn't tell him who it was. So I went back to the guy I knew and said, hey, the winning offer is $10K higher than yours. You have 1 shot. You have 1 hour to get me a contract. I'm giving you a shot because the guy called me every day, text, call, for 3 days basically for his buyer, right? So that relationship matters because his buyer is getting that home only because I gave him that shot, right?
Yeah.
Like we're the gatekeeper basically. And because he did his job and he was on it, even though I never answered his phone call from Friday to yesterday, I called him to tell him that he could get the house, right? I'm serious. This matters.
Yeah.
In this market, this matters a lot, right? So the buyer needs to understand that. And we can't give them agent lingo because they don't understand that, right? We got to give them real examples of how we are winning deals because of our influence in the marketplace, right? Good luck trying that on your own, right? Like it's impossible, right? What else? Anything else that you would add to that?
How do you handle people that only want to work with the listing agent / listing team?
So that is what this is, right? More agents equals more opportunity, right? It's the same concept, right? By the time, like the number one thing I'd focus on there is speed, because by the time they even see the listing come up for sale, it's probably been on the market for like 48 hours, let's say, right? And most listing agents, most good agents are not going to influence the transaction to get dual agency, meaning they're not going to tell the buyer what it's going to take to win. Does that make sense? And there's conflict there. So I'd always lean on, hey, you know, dual agency, there's conflict of interest. Most of the time you're not going to get the answers that you need, right? But through an intermediary like me with influence that everyone knows in the marketplace, I'm going to find out what it's going to take to win, right? Plus the speed at which we can move is way faster, right? Because you trying to call the listing agent that is getting 110 phone calls, good luck. You probably won't get through. Like you're going to miss deals because the listing agent's not answering their phone because they're getting so many phone calls right now, right? I mean, it's very easy to do. So, you know, I would hit on those key points, but hit on the same things we talked about for people who want more agents. They perceive more agents equals more opportunity, right? And I would also challenge their thought process too, which is, you know, why do you perceive working with the listing agent is the best way to winning a home, right? Ask them that question, because I already know what they're going to say. They're going to say, well, the listing agent has more room in their fee, and that can help me save money, right? And I would tell them that's true. We give discounts when we get dual agency. However, there's only so much commission right now, 10 grand. Even if most agents won't give up 10,000 or 15,000, but we're seeing winning offers win by like 40,000 or 50,000, right? So there's not enough room in listing agent commissions to give you the best deal possible, right? So now it's about winning the home, right? Finding out what the target number is. And with the conflict of interest, the listing agent cannot tell you, right? And many of the offers come over with NDA, so they can't disclose any price, any terms, or else they're legally, you know, they're going to have a legal issue on their hands. Like they cannot actually tell you what the terms are. Make sense? So you just help them realize that it's not what they think it is, right? And it doesn't cost them extra money to utilize someone who has experience negotiating offers in this marketplace, right? Make sense?
Yes.
Like, do you think, another good question is, do you think that the seller is going to trust, even if they trust their agent right now, do you think that the seller is going to trust that their listing agent, when they bring an offer from you, has their best interests at heart, right, with dual agency? Don't make it about like your interest with that buyer. It's more about what will the seller think the agent's trying to do if they have that much commission on the line, right? So it's not about who has the least amount of commission. It's about who writes the best, strongest offer. Make sense? So when like companies are considering mergers or like buying another company, they hire independent third parties each to represent them in that sale. Make sense? Why do they do that? Like, why doesn't the company A just meet with company B and they make a deal, right? Because it's an important transaction. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars on the line. Like, they want a fiduciary to see around corners that they're not used to, right? So that's our role, is we do this daily and we know where the corners are, right? And we see around those corners whereas the buyer does not, or a less experienced agent may not be able to see. Make sense? Yeah, that's what I would do. The listing agent one is always, I mean, that's probably like the number one response of buyers. The listing agent one is old and it will always be there. And
Oops, this probably shut off, didn't it?